Okay, so it's another day and it's another part of Betsy. So I'm going to really take 4 different types of greys with me. So I'm going to concentrate on this section here that we've started. We've got quite a good base layer here. We've got our darks in. We need possibly a couple more mid-tones, but mainly some sort of lighter greys. So, I mean, the ones I'm using are just literally, as I've said before, I've just picked them up. It's the 270 from Faber-Castell. We've got the 722 from Stabilo Carbothello. I'm also going to be using the 726 from Stabilo and the Payne's Grey, the 181 from Faber-Castell as well. Now, basically all you're looking for though, if you don't have those colours, I want this to be really accessible to anyone who has any pastel set, you're just looking for a dark grey, a mid grey and a light grey. And that light grey can be sort of a warm grey or a cool grey. I think a cool grey is going to look quite good. Cool greys have blues in them. So this one here, I don't know if you can see it, but can you see how much blue is in there? Whereas this is more of a sort of a warm but very light grey in here as well. So just anything like that really. And we're just going to get some nice little light details in on top. This section here towards the back of her head, obviously you've got some of her feathers, top notch coming sort of down over it. So there's going to be a little bit in shadow, but for now I'm just going to sort of concentrate as if it's not there, and then we'll work it out thereafter. I think the first one I'm going to go into is this one's drawing me. So we can see on the reference that the tiny little hairs, they sort of go, tiny little feathers sort of go in sort of different directions depending on where you are on the neck. We don't need to go too detailed because she already looks pretty detailed, and certainly when you step back from afar she looks all right. So we're just sort of hinting at the direction of the first. So we've got some little marks here. I might actually swap to my Faber-Castell here, just so I can get a slightly sharper, sort of finer point there. But you know, it really doesn't matter. You're just hinting at it really. So let's go. I'm not even thinking about the her little red bib. I really ought to learn the names for them all, shouldn't I? Hey ho. Okay, and then it's sort of, and then as you come down here. So now that I've created those, actually let me zoom you in so you can see that a bit closer. So now that I've created all of those little lines, they're not perfect because obviously it's still fairly early layer. Now that I've created those, let's just go over some of them again a little bit. Now that I've created them, what I might do is just go in between some of them. Let's try this mid-range grey. This is the 726. Just to create a couple of little bits in between those that I've just made. Let's try the Payne's Grey as well, because the Payne's Grey is quite a bit darker. So let's, yeah, that looks quite nice. Play around with it and see what works really. So all those little hairs that I've just created are now just working back through. And obviously working, you know, in between the bits that you've created, if that makes sense. Not much, you know, just here and there. Doesn't need to be done all over. It just makes them stand out a little bit more. And I think we might sort of give this a little bit more love once we've got her sort of top feathers in. So remember, you've got lots of different layers here. Don't be frightened to use them. Okay, so where we are at the moment with it is it's all very samey. So this whole section here all looks quite similar in tone. So what I'm just going to do is just going to use a white. Now I've picked up the Stabilo Carbothello white only because it's longer and I can show you better without my hand in the way. It's great, but you can use the Faber-Castell just as well. Any white that you have really. And I'm managing to get quite a point on this. So, you know, as I say, any white will do. Just looking to sort of create some little differences. You want to keep all of those nice, slightly darker hairs that we've got going on underneath and in some sections, but we want to brighten some sections as well. Art is always about difference. The difference between one tone and another, the difference between one colour and another, the difference between one direction and another. And the more variations you can have, the more realistic I think it looks. Okay, so let's just get some going over here. And then there's lots of tiny little sort of one-off hairs sort of sitting underneath this lot here as well. So you can try sort of like a crisscross. It's almost like sort of noughts and crosses style. It's probably quite a good way of thinking about it. So you've got sort of like 2 lines there, 2 lines there, 2 lines there, 2 lines there, and so on. Okay. So because I've got all of these colours in my hand, and while I'm sort of still thinking of the hairs that we've just done, I'm going to do this bottom section of her, and then we're going to do the little bit, then we're going to do the exciting stuff. So we can leave the exciting stuff till last. Now let's have a look at this. How quickly does that? Just looking from the bottom of there, kind of still comes in. Yeah, that's about right. Just looking for, probably doesn't come in that, probably comes in about there. I'll just try taking that off. So I've just used a bit of putty rubber. It's not the end of the world if I had a little bit of a curve, a bit more of a curve there. But I do think it's more that sort of direction because before it goes sort of like down and then up. So I've just, before, obviously we did that outline fairly gently. So, and that's it, it's disappeared, great. That's all good. Like it when a plan comes together and all that. So I'm going to use my Payne's Grey and I'm just going to look at some of the little marks that sit underneath. You know, we're really not doing much of her body here. Trying to keep this as sort of a nice, hopefully easy tutorial to follow. So you can see when you look really, really closely, you can see just sort of underneath the feathers, just a few sort of little dark marks. And her breast really does come out here. And as I say, that is half of her appeal, is the way this sort of really sort of bends forward. So I'm just using the white now just to kind of get that look. We only really want to finish it to about there anyway. Okay, so we know we've got the shadow here. So again, I'm just using my Payne's Grey at the moment, just sort of creating that slight shadow. There's a little bit down here, just while I've got the dark in my hand. And then we've got some, go there. Just looking at it. And at this early stage, it really doesn't matter too much. We're just indicating that there's some darks going on. Okay. do a couple like that. Right, let's go for, so this is really quite light, this section. So I'm going to go for my lighter blue sort of grey, and I'm really literally just looking at some of the feathers. It's not the, it's not the top layer, and I'm just looking to get some coverage at the end of the day, because this is a dark grey pastel matte and it's a really light section of her, so there does come a point where you have to just kind of fill the tooth in a little bit. I don't want to go too white too soon, because we'll be using that certainly quite a lot on top. So let's just get some nice little blues in. Let's finish this part off here. So we're just getting some coverage. And actually I might just tone down some of these just up here, just in shot there, just because I had it in my hand. I do like it to sort of like look like it belongs to the bit above. Okay. Just adjusted the camera a little bit there so you can see in slightly better detail and light, so it's a little bit more similar to what I'm seeing. Okay, so I am going to just get some white in now, recognising the fact that it's still early days, so it's bobbling all over the place. I just want to again get a bit of coverage. Probably won't go over the dark bits just yet. Leave those in there. Looking at my reference and seeing the direction of the feathers. Seeing that there, and then we've got a really nice light feather that comes up and over there and on there and there. And the feathers sort of come down in that sort of angle to about here, when there's another load of feathers that sort of take over and come this way. Let's hold you still, Betsy. And so still just sort of feeling our way with it. Look at what look at all the different shapes that it's making without getting too bogged down in them. You know, we're aiming for realism, but not so realistic that, you know, you can't finish it. And pastels are great because they look so realistic anyway. Okay. Let's give that a little scrub with a cotton bud, so that we're really sort of blending it in. And see how it's like really creating quite a nice sort of smooth layer here now for us. It's creating, you know, we've got a bit of texture there. We know the direction of the feathers. We've got a feeling for everything. We're getting, you know, a sort of nice sort of light sort of base stroke texturizing layer here, ready for some sort of details to go in on top. Now I've got the little spatula tool, which I'm going to use just above. And in fact, I'm just going to zoom you out a bit so you can see. I'm just going to stroke these hairs in a bit. I'm being a little bit more careful at the top here because I've got more layers. So obviously the more layers you put onto pastel mat, the less you've got to sort of play with, because there does come a point where obviously there's nothing left and you're just sort of fighting against, you know, sort of stuff that's sitting right on the surface. So because we've already worked quite hard on this section, I'm not going to go sort of blending it all out. Whereas here I was able to be a little bit rougher because obviously we haven't done quite as much there. Right, so let's zoom back in. Let's just get this a bit right. Okay, so now that we've got something to work with, having said that, I just didn't scrub this in. So the little shadow bit, don't forget that the shadow, although it's a shadow, it is still feather. Okay, so I'm just going to very lightly use my grey pencil. This is the 270, very light sort of warm grey from Faber-Castell. And I'm going to pop that in there, but then I'm going to go back in over it with the 181, stroking it back in so that it shows that it's shadow, but you can see little hairs underneath, so it's not just sort of one big block. And immediately underneath, I'm going to sort of just create a bit more darkness. So with my light grey now, I'm just going to create a couple of little lighter hairy bits on top. Okay, and just looking here, just concentrating really on the direction. This is just the 270, so that we're not at the absolute highest level yet. You know, we haven't got the, sort of the white out. We do want the area to be nice and bright, but it can't just be one big white blob. Okay, so now before I go too much further, I'm going to just sort of create some darks again, because obviously where we've mixed it all in, they've gone a bit milky. So we do still need to sort of get some kind of difference in there. So I'm just using a mid-range grey, 726, this is Stabilo Calpothello. You can use any sort of mid-grey that you've got, so not the lightest, not the darkest grey. And the reason I'm not using the darkest grey is that, you know, we do want the area to look quite nice and light. We don't want too much sort of darkness kind of mixing in, although I might use Payne's grey for a couple of little sections again. So just putting them in strokes like this. And then we'll have to do the sort of noughts and crosses style lights in over the top. Let's just use a couple of little bits of Payne's grey just here and there. And because I'm being a little bit more delicate now, I am using a fairly sharp Payne's grey at this stage. Basically, I use my sharp pencils for the top layers. The rest of it, I'm quite happy and actually quite like having a bit of bluntness. So look at what shape those dark colours are sort of taking on. You know, sort of underneath things. There's sort of like some of them are long strokes, some of them are crisscrosses. Here we've got a few. You know, we're not going to go overboard. If we have too many, it's going to make it all look a bit sort of dull. If we don't have enough, the lights won't pop enough. So it's a bit of a balancing act. Let's put push this here. And actually, I've made a bit of a mistake there. So I'm just picking up my white pencil because this here, where I've zoomed in closely, is actually fur. So the shadow comes to about there. Doesn't go all up and around here like I have it. But that's okay. We can work with that. And because that's kind of like fresh pastel mat that I've just worked onto sort of over the edge, I'm going to clean my little spatula silicone brush and just press it in. There we go. No one need ever know. Oh, and actually she's got a couple of little, looking at it closely now, she's got a couple of little, tiny little hairs that come in from the background. Okay, right, so going back to the Payne's Grey, let's just do a couple more just in here. And then we really, here, it starts to sort of, these darks just in this bottom corner kind of indicate that her sort of breast is coming out at that stage. And that's what gives it that nice sort of arc and shape that we're looking for. Okay. Okay, I think that's enough dark for now. Now, let's just push it in gently. It will naturally mix a little bit either side, but try and sort of keep the lighter bits light. And there's still plenty of pastel mat here that we're going to be able to play with, so we're going to get some really bright lights on here now, really make it stand out. But it's important to do the preparatory work first. I don't know what I've done with that shadow actually, that's pretty rotten. Let's have a look. Let's just use this, I'm just using my 722. Just in there. Okay. And I'm actually using this 722 just because I had it in my hand. I'm just telling you what I'm doing instinctively. And some of the little bits that I can see in her fur are just in need of just sort of like pressing into the surface more. We still haven't used, you know, sort of up to our top layers yet. And it's almost using it as a blending tool. Okay, so that's fine. Now, I'm going to use my white, so that you can see, hopefully. I should have got myself a longer one of these white pencils so my hand's not in the way, but hopefully you can see. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of look at the direction that these little lines are taking. I'm not worried at the moment that they're bobbling over the surface a bit because I can smooth them back in. Just going to look at my reference, look at the direction that these feathers are taking. Just put those in there. And actually there's a very slightly darker section just in there. I'm just going to put a bit more Payne's Grey in, just before we go too much on top. Just sort of sitting underneath this section. And then... Right, I've decided not to be lazy and I went and got a longer pencil so my hand's not in the way. Okay, so just coming crisscross across here. So remember that the sort of the feathers layer one on top of the other. We've already put some this way. So we've got some that kind of come down from here in that sort of direction. Some here. Just down in here. Coming across this way. So as I say, you're looking for lots of difference. Think of your noughts and crosses. That will help. Okay. Less noughts and crosses to this left side, more sort of distinguished in there. And actually there's another, so this section all the way down here, there's quite a bit of depth in. So reaching for the Payne's grey again. Knowing that I'm going to sort of go over it again. But just to create those tiny little depthy bits. Okay. And at this stage actually, before I put the final details on top, I'm just going to push that in because it is sitting on the surface quite hard. So if we push it into the surface, then we'll have a sort of a clear run at it on top. And then in here. Okay. Might even treat myself to a bit of scrubbing here, just with a paper stump, cotton buds. And we might decide that we want to sort of really fluff this bit out. It depends where we're going to mount it. You know, we could just have it so that the mount comes to that stage, to the sort of base of it, or fluff it out and sort of have it finished there and then have a bit of space around it, depending on the finish that you want. I mean, obviously in an ideal world, you know, you could do sort of a bigger portrait and you could finish all of her. But the purpose today was to create a nice beginner's tutorial and concentrate on the slightly easier bits. Give you confidence. Okay, so back in with my white, and now I can feel, can you see the way that that's going over and it's not sort of bobbling so much over the surface like it was? And that's because we've got a decent enough base layer there, which is great. And then these are a bit more pronounced. Those that haven't got quite as much base in there, so they might need a bit more blending and then reapplying. And so it's just to get the general feel of it. And then I can't help the fact that I do actually hold my pencil quite close to the page to keep reminding myself. Quite close to the pastel mat. So I quite like small little pencils because I can kind of get really in and into it. Okay. Now my pencil's getting a bit blunt and it's starting to sort of bobble up a little bit. So we're going to give it a blend and sharpen up. Okay, let's blend this. Starting to take shape now. Just remember your noughts and crosses. Here we go. Good old Betsy. Okay, and then I think we're going to do some more. Sort of fine hairs. Kind of come down in sort of triangles as well, obviously, which you can do on this top layer. And now that you've put that sort of base layer in, you can be sort of like a little bit freer with your top layer, just sort of pushing it in, flicking it different directions. Couple of sections here that are a bit darker, so let's sort of protect those a bit more. Okay, that's going slightly off camera. Let's have a look. I can just do some here. So can you see how we're sort of creating a little bit of chaos in there? So that they all kind of sort of look like they're all going in different directions. So some of them have bobbled over the surface, so that's okay. I'm going to just be using my spatula, silicone, whatever. Not great with names, am I? And we're just pressing them in. And we're going to press this in here. And generally towards these later layers, when you're sort of doing the blending, you know, you can still sort of see all the little darks underneath because they don't get blended around quite so much because we've pushed them into the pastel mat. They're sort of staying put a bit. So we're creating this sort of illusion on top. Okay, let's have a look at that from afar and see how she looks. Okay, so looking at her from afar, always a really important thing to do. I can see that there's quite a bit more light that needs to go in here and quite a bit more light that needs to go in here as well. So I've just picked up my Stabilo. There's no rhyme or reason for that really, other than the fact that I wanted to. Any white would do. Let's just, you know, this was quite grey. Let's just get a little bit more white. And yeah, this sort of bit section here. And in fact, I've done the same this side. I think I know why it is actually, because I think actually this is still her little front bib thing. So that's where I've made the mistake. So I'm just going to use the 192, which is the red, to just sort of bring this out so that it's the shape of the bib again. You know, very often your painting will talk to you and tell you what's wrong. You just need to spend a little bit of time looking at it and give it the ability to be able to do so. So this is all sort of bib as well. Okay. And that is there. So this 192 is just a very, very deep dark red. We'll be doing the bib sort of closer detail in a minute, but I just wanted to get that fixed. Okay, and then let's sharpen up a minute. So the tiny little hairs that are going over the bib at the moment, I'm not going to worry about because we're going to do that sort of in closer detail. I'm just coming in with the Faber-Castell white just to sort of create a few more little hairy bits, furry bits, feathery bits, sorry, whatever. I'm so used to doing fur. That's what I call them. Okay, and let's just press in a bit harder there. That really hits the light, that section. So does that. Let's go over this, don't know what we were doing there. This is all wrong there. Let's go over that more. And then from there, it really does sort of bend out. Let's give her even more belly. And then just creating more light. And then long sort of strokes there, longer here. Just was craving a little bit more light. And luckily we've still got the ability to be able to do it. We still have a little time at the end where anything that's not looking quite as it should do, we can tweak. Okay. Now then, actually this bit at the top here is a bit darker than I've got it there, so I'm just gonna, so we've created those nice lights. Just knocking them back now with the Payne's Grey. I'm just using it on its side, just so that it's, so that they're there but they're not there too much. Just knocking it back so they sort of sit underneath. And then let's just get a few more sort of light just in here to sort of sit over the top. You can see I do have a habit of pressing too hard sometimes, which can be handy at times and not at others. Okay, so that's really where the main sort of light is coming from. And then we've got some really, looking at my reference, this is really nice and light at the front here, particularly the bit immediately underneath the bib. So we do want this to be quite sort of bright really. But all those tiny little darks that we did are standing us in good stead. Okay. So we can just very gently push those in. I don't like it bobbling on the surface. Some people are okay with that. You don't want to overblend either. It's a bit of a difficult one. You don't want to blend too much, but you don't want it sort of to look all bobbly over the surface either. Those in there, and then you can see, and also by blending a little bit it does sort of give it a bit more of a painterly look, which I quite like. I still like it really looking realistic, but I do like it to have a bit of a softness that perhaps a very sharp high-res photograph doesn't have. You know, it is a painting, it is a drawing that you're doing. It's not, you're not just copying a photograph. You're putting soul into it, you're putting love into it. Okay, Betsy, I think we're almost there. You're looking fabulous. Right, should we do her feathers on top? Right, so we're going to have to be quite brave with, I'm just bringing her neck out a little bit there. It's just a little bit more curved than I had. I'm not too worried because we're going to be going over it. We are going to have to be quite brave when it comes to these hairs on top, because obviously we've already done the rest of her and, you know, we're quite happy with her, etc. And now comes the point where you're going to be going right over the background. And as I say, unless you want to do a background, once you've done it, you've sort of more or less committed. Apart from if you've got a very, very light hand, and you can do it with a light hand, then you can use a sort of a bit of a putty eraser. I'm just going to, I think this comes out a little bit more than I have it here. So I'm just going to use the black there, just sort of creating that, just because this is what's going to sit underneath one of the first hairs that we do. So just using a little cotton bud there, just to smooth it in. So you look at these spindles, they go in all different sort of directions. They're a little bit, you know, one crosses, you've got some sort of loose split ends. They're not dead straight. They sort of curve one way and then they curve the next. So we are just going to have to be quite brave with it. The first colour that I would pick up, and we're just going to do this over the black. So there's a nice little spindle here. And I may have to stop talking when I'm doing them because it is a bit nerve-wracking. Okay, so the first colour that I've gone for, rightly or wrongly, is a yellow ochre. So I've used the Stabilo Carbothello 690. Can't know if you can focus that. And that's just a yellow ochre colour. It's not the light that we need, but it will just give us that sort of lovely yellowy warm glow. So we've got some that sort of sit here, and I do think actually, do we need a bit more grey? It doesn't matter too much because it's still, let's just put, I'm just putting a bit of grey here. That's just down to my sort of line drawing. Just smooth that in a little bit. Okay, now then let's have a look at the direction. So I've got my hand and I'm just sort of wiggling it a bit. It kind of comes right down to sort of here. And let's just, now I know that they're not all this colour. I'm just getting the feel for it at the moment, to be honest. And I know that this section here is really full. So if I get it slightly wrong, as you come further out, you have to be a little bit more, you have to sort of get it right. But this sort of section here is sort of quite close to, they're quite close to each other. So I'm just kind of like wiggling it a bit, really. I'm getting a feel for it as well. So I think I'm going to do up to her head here to start with. Let's just zoom you out so you can see. So I'm doing it, I'm holding the end of it and I'm pushing it up just to sort of give it a little bit of a, you know, it doesn't have to be all exactly the same. And I've taught Betsy in a in-person class, and the temptation is really strong to not wiggle it enough, is to just go straight lines all the way, because that's what your brain is telling you kind of makes sense, because we, you know, our brains do generally sort of try and find us, you know, something that's a bit logical. but they wiggle. So we have to make them wiggle. But it is nerve-wracking. It's like whiskers on animals. You know, it's they're not easy. Okay. Okay, so that's some nice, I mean, you can only very, very lightly sort of see it there. But that's because it's yellow ochre, so it's not kind of like really sitting out. But I wanted to do that deliberately because then we've got something that we can kind of play with. It'd be nice to have a cream or a lighter yellow of some sort. Let's see what I've got in my little pot of joy. That's fairly similar colour. Let's try one of those. Right, I've got the 106 here, which is a sort of a brighter yellow. And I am just going to do a few of those. And at some stage, we're going to be looking at the individual strands and doing some colours on some and some colours on the other. But at the moment, it's just about getting some different colours in there. You know, when you look at the strands closely, you can see that some have like little dark bits in. It's too nerve-wracking to do the darks just yet. Let's get the lights in first. Put some more down here. And I do really sort of come out here. I may go a bit quiet while I'm doing this. Right, I'm going to be brave and do one coming right out of her head here. Not that brave, it's quite tentative. Okay, it comes there. And just remember, you're going to be building up lots of different layers. But also, just remember where it is at its thickest. So you've got lots going on around this area, but as you get towards the outer edge, they're fewer and further between. So that's quite important, because I did see some people do it and it literally went all the way around. But just, yeah, really look at the areas where they're most concentrated. At the moment we're okay. You know, they're sort of really few and far between that we're doing at the moment. Let's have a look. And if we go over her little black top notch thing, we can just pop some little hairs over the back. Okay. So we're starting to get there, albeit tentatively. They're all sort of going in this direction. Okay. Now, if you've got a cream, now would be a good time to use it because there's lots of cream in there. I haven't got it on me, and I think it's going to be fine just to use a white and then sort of colour over with one of these colours that I've just used just now, and sort of create that cream. So now I'm looking at the little black bit that's behind the red bit, technical terms again, and there's a nice sort of like little light bit there. I might just kind of zoom in a bit more. Let's zoom you in. I zoomed myself in on the reference photo. Okay, so let's just have a little look at that. And obviously we know that the bit that's nearest her head is thickest, so we can go a little bit harder there. And then, you know, you can kind of go over some of these. You know, it's not going to be exact, but let's just... So I'm going over some of my same marks. Also thickening them a bit. They're a bit spindly that I've done. You can do some sort of little shorter ones here just to add to the thickness of the feeling nearest her head. And then as we go from there, it kind of goes like that. Oops. Okay, sorry if I'm going a bit quiet. I've just got to concentrate a little bit. Don't forget to wiggle it. I'm saying that as much to myself as to you. Okay, let's just have a look. Now then, where do they come down to? They only come down to about there actually. So you've got to look at where they come down to. I've gone a little bit low with them, that's okay. Artistic license and all that, but I might have to put some of my darker bits. So I'm going to use the 175 actually, it's quite a nice one for that. So I'm going to look at where the darker bits come in relation to here. And they come to about there, don't they? So that's kind of where the ends are. I'm just going to pop a few of those in and see that you also get some sort of dark bits in between as well. Just to sort of add a little bit of interest. Can't quite see that there, can you? And then we've got sort of ones that come in here. Let's add a few little tiny dark bits in. A few little flecks. There's quite a sort of a dark one in there. These little dark strands as well will actually sort of create a bit of depth and interest. Otherwise you wouldn't be able to see them as well. And some of them, the dark bits appear to just be on the ends. It's almost like they've been burnt. And I've not got anywhere near enough spindles at the moment, but I'm just easing my way in, to be honest with you. I'm just, you know, getting a feel for it. So as I say, this is the 175 that I'm using. They are actually quite black, but the 175 is a really, really dark brown. If we need to blacken them up a bit, we can just use black over. That's not a problem. Okay, and they are black here as well, so let's be brave. And they kind of go off in different directions as well. I say, go at it gently. Don't do too many. You know, there's quite a lot of air, quite a lot of space here. Let me just zoom you out as I was doing that. So yeah, there's quite a lot of space sort of around here. You've got sort of like a thick clump here, but there's quite a bit of sort of background that you still want in there. So although you might have like the odd little spindle, you know, just look at where there's still lots of background. Got a few in here. Okay, I think we can do some more lights. Okay. I'm afraid I am going to just not talk as I'm doing this, because otherwise they'll wiggle too much. You sort of need to be quite, so she's just talking again, you do need to be quite firm when you're doing them, as well as kind of a little bit tentative. Don't be too tentative. Okay, let's just do some more in the area where we know that they're at their thickest. I think I'm going to do them in white and then get some sort of colours going over the top. There's quite a lot. Kind of come down here. And certainly a lot more concentrated here. It's quite difficult because the background is actually quite a nice sort of creamy sandy colour, so it's difficult to see what are spindles and what aren't. Okay, so I'm going to go back over those little marks that I did. Now you can use any sort of yellow ochre. You've got these two, so we've got the one that we used before, which is the 690. That's absolutely fine. I'm going to try the 183 from Faber-Castell, just because I like it and it's got a slightly firmer point. So I'm just going to find these little white hairs that I've just done and I'm going to colour over them with this. I'll also use, show you that it's exactly the same. So they're very, very similar, these two colours. This was the Stabilo 690 that I used before. Obviously I've made things a bit difficult for myself because you have to be careful where you put your hand, because otherwise you're going to smudge your painting. But yeah, use some glassine for that. And look at, are my spindles too thin? In which case, once I start using some other colours, they should sort of flatten out a bit. Oops. I was a bit more careful there because, as I say, I'm aware of the fact that there's quite a bit of background in this section here, which I want to keep. Okay. Go back in with some white again. Let's just create a little bit more emphasis around the head, because we know it's fairly thick here. So I'm just doing some sort of little ones there. Actually, this is a nice little one that comes over here, which we did in We did in that nice ochre colour to start with. I've gone over it with white. I'm going to go back over it again with another ochre in a minute. Keep wiggling. And also you don't need to just do full lines each time. You know, you can look for some of the, just make sure I haven't got any black on my hand. You know, look for some parts where they just hit the sun a bit more. So they're not all just, you know, each spindle isn't all just exactly the same colour. You know, as they curve up and they bend towards the sun, they get lighter. So it's about noticing all those little changes without getting too stressed about it either as well. Because we're going for sort of like an overall effect. And of course, where you are working on very sort of plain pastel mat here, when I say plain, we are working on fresh pastel mat, so we've not had the ability to do lots and lots of layers because we're working on top of the background. You know, they are going to, you know, sort of bobble over the surface a little bit, so we've just got to be quite clever and go back over them at points. So we know we've got some in here. Let's go up here. Should we do one more in there? There's not a huge gap, is there? Right, let's do it. Okay, let's go back in on that one. It's scaring me, it's too white. I think we have to accept the fact we're going to be doing a tiny bit blending in a minute with either the silicone tool or just going over some, because we just need a bit of coverage at this stage. Okay, right, so that was the 183, so putting lots of lovely sort of warmth into it. I think perhaps we need a little bit more light as well now. So let's go over. It's just the white. Let's join up with that one. It's definitely getting there. Right, let's not go over a really backgroundy type area without having a sharp pencil. So there's a few more just on top of her head there. So let's do some there. They are a bit fatter than I've done here, but I'd rather do them thinner to start with and have to fatten her up. Okay. Right, I've done that one too far over. Let's get... Just seems to come too far in front of her body, so I'm just using the putty eraser. Doesn't matter too much. It just felt a bit wrong, you know, when you just suddenly feel like something feels a bit wrong. Okay, right, so shall we? Let's just try and show you a bit close. Some of these here. As I say, it is more difficult because I do want to keep the background clear because I think she'll really stand out against it. And say if you're new to all of this and you make marks on the background, don't worry about it. You can either use the putty eraser or you can just do a background. You know, it's really not the end of the world. But I think she looks quite nice without a background, you know, with just the pastel mat underneath her. Might also look to put a few sort of little browns in there. I know we've got the dark sepia. We could just use the dark sepia, but sort of a lighter version. Or what else is there? The 180 might be quite a nice one to do as a little. So this is sort of a soft brown. It is the 180 from Faber-Castell. And perhaps sort of do just a few little lines, because obviously each spindle isn't just one colour. So the bit of the spindle that is furthest away from you will be a bit darker than the bit that's closest to the sun, and so on. So even within one spindle, you know, there's going to be several changes of colour. So rather than looking at every single spindle on our reference photo, we can just sort of replicate that by just putting a few different sort of colours in. And also there's quite sort of a nice sort of thickness just in here that I might just put a few. It would make sense that they're sort of thicker towards her head. And you know, if it's too dark, you then go back over with light and so on. Let's zoom you back out again. Okay. Let's just give this a sharpen. Might help if you have some soothing music to play while you're doing this. Certainly no heavy metal. Okay. Oops. And also, by using this over some existing hairs, you'll help fatten them up a bit. It will sort of mix with the colours that are sat on there. She's definitely getting there. Okay, I'm sort of using this as a blending tool in a way, which is quite interesting. I didn't realise I was doing that until I did it. And that does actually help it. A, it helps sort of fatten them up, and B, it helps sort of blend the little bubbles over the top. And then I think we'll then go in for some sort of lighter little strands afterwards. Okay, we've got more here than I've got going on. Okay. Now let's get some warmth in, particularly here we've not got an awful lot going on. Let's go back over some lines. So this is the 106, so any sort of muted but bright yellow, because you want it to sparkle. But you know, the idea is that you sort of put it on and then we will sort of probably take it, knock it back, but with a white. This is the 106, I think I said that. Okay. You do really want it to look like the sun is hitting her, which I think it does. I just realised I haven't done her bib yet. That was me thinking that was the last thing to do, and I just looked down and... Sorry, Betsy. So I'm going to just create a little bit of warmth and a little bit of yellow in here. But we will be coming back over it to sort of knock it back. And so if you've got a cream, I do have a cream. I was just trying to show a way of me not unpacking it and also using colours to blend. Right, I'm going to do, where are we? Where's the 175? Since we did the tips of the hairs with the 175. So let's just kind of get the tip going in there. Just be really mindful of where your hands are. I just nearly went down her top notch. So it looks almost black from here. Let's put some nice little darks in. It's incredible, really. Beautiful bird. I think she's only called something like a grey crowned crane or something awful like that. I mean, so much more beautiful and deserving of a beautiful name. But she's got a beautiful name with that. She's called Betsy. I've got some here. few in there as well. Don't be tempted to go too overboard, it's better to do less than more, because they are quite strong. You do need them there though. And I'm just going to use, because this is almost black, this dark sepia, just going to make sure that we didn't do any, you know, the feathers obviously sit, the spindles sit behind the head. So let's just push that in. And I've taken away some of the black by doing that, by being a bit blendy. So I'm going to go in with the 180 for a few in here. Wiggling it all the way. Okay, now we need to go in with some white. The sun really does capture these little spindles, so let's make sure that we're showing that. Does every single spindle have a dark bit at the end is the other thing we need to have a close look at. I think it probably does, looking at it. Even if they're sort of closer to the sun and they look quite light. Let's get the lights done first though. Just going over some of these yellows. Some of these yellows are a little bit too yellow. And of course by going over them with white, you make them cream-ish. So I'm pushing up and through the... And I'm actually wiggling my pencil there. That helps create a few little differences. That was a bit too straight, that one. Let's just do a variant from it so it doesn't look quite so bad. Let's go over that yellow, it's a bit yellow. Okay, now let's go around all the edges, all the tips, and give them little dark bits with the 175. So I'm pretty sure most of them do by the looks of it. And it will add a nice sort of, almost like vignette to the painting by keeping everything sort of dark in the tops. Couple in here, couple in there, but yeah, definitely at the bases here. Going over some of the tips that I've already done. I don't mind if they mix in a little bit. Apologies for being quiet, just needed a bit of reflection time on that. Right, I think what I'm going to do is now give it a bit of a blend in areas where I can see it needs it, without really trying not to, particularly in areas where there's background around it, try not to create sort of just smudgy messes. This is where this is really good, and you might want to, if you don't have one of these, instead of using a cotton bud at this stage, I really wouldn't use a cotton bud here. I'd use it perhaps there, that would be okay. But when you're doing something with this much finesse, you know, you can just use your fingers. Because if you just pop your finger on there, it just sort of prods it in and it keeps it in the right place. Just use a fresh finger each time. That's quite a handy little thing to do, because basically when you use your fingers to blend, it kind of, the stuff that you've put on there stays in the same place. When you use something like a cotton bud or a paper stump, it sort of moves it around a little bit, cotton bud especially. But these little silicone tools, they're not expensive. Okay, I haven't found a cream, but I have found a Naples type colour, 692 from Stabilo. And there are just a couple of points where these little dark bits at the end don't look like they actually belong to a strand. So I'm just going to pop them in. And it's quite a nice colour. And go over a few of your darker bits as well. It's okay to go over the same line several times. In fact, that's what you want to be doing. And certainly here, you know, we've got lots going on. There's the one there that I've just needs a little tip to it. Just 175 again. But, you know, if you want to use black, you can use black. If you want to use a very dark brown, use a dark brown. I'd keep it sort of on the browny side rather than sort of any, you know, I wouldn't use the Payne's Grey because it's quite blue. And these are all really lovely warm colours. Just see what this. Just Just using this 180 now, just to sort of blend a couple of strands. Sorry, you can tell, can't you, that I'm concentrating. My voice goes really quiet. And then a little end missing there. So this is just the 180. Sort of using it just to sort of blend as it goes. You can always pop some lights in again as necessary. I think I've been a bit tentative over here, so I'm going to use this Naples 690 from Stabilo, just to get some slightly thicker strands going on. Really make sure it looks like it's coming out from behind. Here. Get going with my white now over the top and using it again to sort of blend. Doesn't have to be the whole strand. Think about the direction as well of some of these little spindles, which, you know, the little bits that curve towards the light. I have to say this has been the hardest part of her so far. And the least enjoyable. But it's got to be done, it's part of the picture. It's what makes Betsy, Betsy. Let's just do another little endy bit on there. So just a couple of little bits here, less doing sort of whole strands and just looking for little sections on the strands that I want to sort of create mini highlights. Pressing fairly hard, but pushing up or across rather than into. These are sharpen. Right, a few more, I think we can take a break. We can always come back to it once we've had a little break from it. And done her little bib at the front. Just doing a few more here, a bit thicker here. I think I've wiggled them a bit too much there. I do want it to look though. Actually, I might use the 180 there because it's a darker colour. So as it sort of comes over her neck, just want it to look a bit thicker. Do a bit of, just doing a little bit of sort of glazing in. And here is really quite, it's quite thick, isn't it? That's a bit better. So just doing a couple of little glazes just closest to her head. Just sort of creates a feeling of thickness. So this is a 180, but you can use any sort of yellowy brown. Let's go back in with the white because a lot of those sort of yellows and browns have now mixed, but we do want some brightness now. Let it sparkle. Wiggling it. Right, I'm not allowed to do any more in that area. I've started to do too many. Well, not too many, but no more. Tell yourself off. Just get a couple of the little 175 endy bits. Pick a couple. Don't know why I did a curve there. Okay. I think we're going to give her a bit of a break and we're going to come back and do any last minute tweaks. Oh, I've just seen something though. Hold on a minute. What did I see? Was it this one here? Something like that looked a bit odd. Okay, so I think that's it for now. And then we will we'll come back to her. Let's do the front bib and then we'll have a general look and check that there's nothing else that we need to do on those spindles. Okay, so now we're going to do the bib. I'm just coming in first of all with my black, because black is just going to really sort of create the shape and the darkness that I want in here. Before I do anything else, I'm going to be careful not to go over over everything else too much. I do just want to get this nice and dark. Okay. And then we can use a little cotton wool bud just to make sure it's well and truly sort of sitting in there. Okay. Right, so the next thing that I'm going to do, we've got the vibrancy there, so we've got that lovely beautiful red there. Now we need some detail. So the first thing I'm going to do is using my 175, I'm not going to go for black because it's not really too black. And I'm just going to start creating a few little lines. Make sure you're leaving plenty of space for that beautiful red to come through. And I'm just having a look. Obviously we've got the sort of darker shady, actually it's sort of here, isn't it? And then I'm going to get some red a minute just to go over this section. I created a bit of depth there that didn't actually exist, and I don't want to get confused. So so I'm using the 175 because I want to create those little dark bits, but I don't want them to be so dark that it kind of ruins that lovely vibrancy that we've got. So I'm just going to sort of do, looking at my reference, just looking at where there are little lines. It's like they come across in here, isn't it? And then there's one in there. You can always put a bit of red back in, obviously with a pastel pencil anyway. And this one here is just a little bit darker. And you've got sort of like a little bit of shading here. So I'm just going to use a bit of the 175 just to sort of shade it off a bit underneath. And then here as well, got a bit of shading just in there. So I'm just going to use a couple of little bits of the 175. Now on top of all of that, on top of all those darks that I just put in, I'm going to put the 192. So basically we've created the darks with the 175, which is the dark sepia, so very dark brown, to really get that depth. But the darks aren't brown, they're red, they're a dark red. So I'm then putting the 192, which is a really dark red, on top. If I'd just done the dark red on its own, it wouldn't give it quite the depth that we're looking for. So I'm just kind of going in and I'm going over and I'm allowing it to just really sink into the surface. Okay, and I'm still making sure that lots of that beautiful red is coming to the surface. I'm then going to go back and pop in a little bit of red, just in sections, just in bits where, you know, we might have overdone it. Just want to keep that vibrancy. You can even go back over those darks that you've created with the red, just so that it really looks like it's a proper shadow, but you know, the colour is still there. And you know, this is all going to be red. Actually, that's gone a bit, it's going to get my black out there because that was, it's very dark and I've sort of just lightened it up a bit too much there. It's going to press it like that. Okay. I'm going to pop a bit of orange in as well, just the orange we had before. We used the Spectrum orange from Derwent. You can use any orange, any bright light orange. Just giving it a little bit of a glow, so it sort of matches the bit of red that we've got above as well. Just a couple of dots here and there. Okay, and then I'm going to go for a pink, I think. Am I? No, I'm going to go for white. Ignore that. I think white, because then what I can do, so I'm going to start creating some of my little highlights in here. But then if they're too light, I can just blend them into and it will mix with all the reds that we've got going on. It's actually quite a detailed area, but you know, we're just wanting to hint at it. Wanting to show that we can see it's detailed without showing every single last bit of detail. And of course, these are tiny little hairs that are coming over as well. Very, very, very fine sort of hairs. Let's do a couple of little dots around here. It can be tempting to sort of dot all over it, and then you end up losing some of the red. Look at the little lines that you did and work either side of them, because those little lines were the depthy bits. And then we've got a really nice sort of light bit there. Okay. So I'm just going to use my silicone tool now to just push those into the surface. It's not the final layer yet, but it's just showing a little bit of difference, a little bit of interest in here. And I don't want those hairs coming too far over. I want this red to really ping out at you. Okay. Let's try and go for a little bit more detail again. I think we're going to need to go back in with our 175 and just sort of create the little lines. Go in there, and then there's one that sort of comes down here. So say there's sort of a distinct line there within the shadow around it, and then there's a bit of shadow just going on in there. Okay, and we've also got a little bit of depth just in here. Just I do just want, so I'm just using any white. So whenever you put a depthy bit in, don't forget to sort of cover it over with some hairs so the depth looks like it's sitting underneath the hairs there. Okay, so then let's just go back over, let's have a look, and then we've got some little squiggly bits. Let's go back over again with the 192. So we're cementing it in, but we're making it a deep dark red. Actually, I think there's a little bit of light just under here, isn't there? I think I haven't done quite a big enough bib. So I'm going to just add a little bit more bib there. Add a couple of little lights. And then go back over it with a 192 because I just want to knock it back a bit because this sits very slightly in front of it. They're all tiny, tiny little changes, but they are changes that do make a difference. Okay, so now just going in with my white. Just looking for some little areas where, it's a bit like when you're doing a nose on an animal where you've got sort of like the little dark bits, you know, sort of around, they're like the little circles. And then you sort of seek and search for the little light bits on top. And then we've got quite a lot of light here as it's hitting the sun a bit more. Around there, sort of hitting it. But we don't want to lose that beautiful red, which is starting to a little bit there. So we will have to, I think probably some of those hairs do come across, but not as thickly as that. Right, let's go back in with our red on top everywhere, just so we keep it looking overall red. Okay, let's just go for a bit more shading just under here. So that was the 192. Let's just put a bit of the dark sepia in as well. I just want this to sort of create a nice on there. And where I've sort of gone over with the dark sepia there, I just want to still make sure that it does show as being red. There's no fur this side, so I've that's actually wrong. Just going to use my dark sepia. So this bit here that I've done in a light, that was actually just my outline. There's not really much hair that you can see from there. This sort of comes over in that direction from there. Okay, that's starting to come together a little bit. Okay, so a little mistake that I can see here is just a little bit darker than I've got it. So that just needs to, and those hairs there don't come that way. Those hairs there go, let's just find they sort of curl in this way, yes. But I had them too far over. Again, that's the benefit of taking a little step back. While I've got the very, very dark pastel pencil in my hand, I'm just going to make sure that this lovely, gorgeous little fluffy black bit, top notch, furry bit on top of her head, whatever it's called, is just looking really nice and furry. So obviously as time goes on, you know, and you sort of blend with it, your hand might press on it and so on, it can just lose a little bit of its intensity, and we don't want that. This is really, really important to get that nice and black. So it doesn't matter too much, but we've just, I made the shadow a little bit low there. There's not really enough room to really make this sort of spectacular when it comes to detail. So you're just going to have to sort of choose to do a couple of little dots. Look at where your lightest values are. And sort of work on those bits. These sort of sit under the hair. You know, all in all, I'm not too displeased with how that looks overall. Just going to try another little pencil here just to give it a bit of pep. There's a 305 that I've got from Carbothello here, which has just got a little bit more orange in than the other one. The other one's slightly more sort of pinky. If you don't have it, really, it doesn't matter. You can use your red together with an orange and just keep sort of layering it that way. But I'm just sort of thinking that this is just such a sort of a prominent part of the picture as a whole. You know, you don't want it to lose its intensity. Okay. And this little bit here is actually still red, even though it's in shade. You have to remember it is still in red. And I think I am going to just bring that out a little bit. Don't want it to look too measly. That was going back to the 310. Either or is, you know, as I say, it's fine. You can even just in the shadowy areas still show a little bit of difference, still show that you know that it's red in there. There's a bit just in there. And this, although it's shadowy, it is still quite reddy as well. It's just giving that a coating. And there is a little bit more red just up here. So I'm using the 192 because where it's sitting underneath lots of fur, it's you know, you don't want to go overboard. And in fact, actually, I think I might have made that a little bit bigger than it needs to be. So again, by not using something that's too bright, I'm going to make everything pink. I can go over then with the light grey that I've got there, which is the 270. But to be honest, any light grey would do absolutely fine there. Let's try, while I've got the light grey, let's just try a couple of little dots, because the light grey will just not be quite as sort of in your face as the white. I will use the white for this tip though. You know, this is really quite light at the bottom here. It's really hitting the light. So sort of notice that. Notice some of the other bits. Lots of sort of little dotty bits. But keep, you know, respect your dark areas as well. And that's particularly sort of light there. That might need just going over a bit with the red, the reddy orange, the 305. Just light glazing, so it's there, but it's not there too much. Okay, so let's have a look at her from afar. Oops. Okay, so you can see most of her in there. I'm really pleased with her. I think, you know, hopefully you've really enjoyed this little study. I think what I'm going to do is leave it for a day or so. I'm going to edit this video. And then, as always, I'm going to come back, and if there are any last minute little tweaks, etc. that need to be done, then we'll come back in and do them. Okay, just a couple of little tweaks that I can see. Just looking at some of these little spindles that we've done, you know, some of them are a little bit bobbly over the surface. So I'm just using the 175 just to sort of blend them back down again, and also make, you know, a couple of little ends. You know, if we've decided that the ends should be dark, then let's make them dark. Okay, a couple of little darker bits in there. Obviously, where this is sort of sitting underneath all of these hairs, we do actually sort of want it to look quite dark. And maybe, because we're saying that this is still her neck, maybe we have that sort of going on underneath, make it look a little bit more even. So the other thing that I noticed was this cheek. I'm just going to use the 192, and I just want to create, I mean, obviously I haven't done the markings absolutely exactly. Just popping a few little ones in there with the 192. But you know, when you look at the cheek, obviously this is the highest bit, that's the bit that's closest to you, and then it sort of fades away very fractionally underneath. So I think we just need to create a bit of shading. So I did a 192, and then this is the grey, and I'm just using on its side. I don't know if this is right yet, but I know it needs to be darker. So this is the 726 from Stabilo Carpathello. So I'm just using a glazing technique, and already that's just given her face a little bit of shape. I am going to ignore some of the spindles because I think if we do too many of those, it looks a bit odd. So we're going to ignore those. But yeah, the bottom of her cheek did need just a little bit of shaping.